Good evening. We are doing it live right here in the 5 o'clock hour in Los Angeles. Mottek On Money, 5 nights a week for you, live on the air here in 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast at kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. War worries, higher benchmark bond yields, and higher oil prices all weighing on the stock market this week, as we've just seen the stock suffer the worst losses in quite some time. In fact, for the week, the Dow was down 1.6%, the S&P 500 down about 2.5%, the NASDAQ down more than 3%, with the NASDAQ logging back-to-back weekly losses. The S&P 500 snapped 2 straight weeks of gains, and all 3 of those benchmark indices booking their largest percentage weekly drop since the week ending at the end of September. Stocks taking a hit as that yield on the 10-year note, which impacts fixed-rate mortgage rates, soared to nearly 5% this week, the highest seen since July of 2007. And mortgage rates hit a new 23-year high this week. Treasury yields backed off a bit today, but the impact of the rise earlier in the week was still being felt in the markets. Stocks seeing continued selling pressure from rising yields after bearish traders worried that the Fed chairman, in his remarks this week, meant that another interest rate hike could be coming and the Fed might not cut rates until sometime late next year. Higher for longer is the belief ongoing here on Wall Street. The nearly 2-week war between Israel and Hamas also weighing on investors, and investors further concerned about escalation by a possible ground invasion by the Israeli military. Palestinians in Gaza reported heavy strikes in the southern region, where they'd been told to evacuate, with a large Israeli town in the north near the Lebanese border also evacuating. 2 American hostages released by Hamas terrorists. We'll talk about what's happening with Lisa Daftari, editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk, coming up live later this hour. The Beverly Hills Police Chief Mark Stainbrook releasing a statement today showing that proactive steps are being taken in Beverly Hills to enhance safety and security there. Safety and well-being of the community, his top priority. The Beverly Hills Chamber of Commerce and Rodeo Drive, meanwhile, celebrating 100 years this year. I'll talk about what's happening with Todd Johnson, President and CEO of the Beverly Hills Chamber of Commerce. He'll be joining us live later this hour. But first, on world events, the economy, the markets, politics, too. Joining us live now is the one and only Ben Stein for our occasional Frankenstein conversation here. Ben Stein, financial and political commentator, author of numerous books, White House speechwriter as well. And the list goes on. Ben Stein, thank you very much for taking the call here for our Frankenstein conversation, which we do as needed. What's your impression of the president's speech last night, given your illustrious background in speech writing and following world events here?
Well, I don't think it was a bad speech. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Mr. Biden, but he said all the right things, and I don't doubt that he did the best he could do. I have no idea what kind of speechwriter he has. I know he's in an incredibly difficult situation, and I don't know what he can do to get himself out of it. We've let ourselves get to be a marshmallow of a country. I don't think we're respected around the world the way we used to be, and in that situation, I don't know what he can say. He said, America is just not the America that I knew when I was a younger man. I think I don't think it's the America that we knew when Mr. Trump was president. I'm not running for president or campaigning for anyone, but I think people all around the world sense weakness in America, and it's not good for us. And scares me to death that we are now confronting a bloc of nations, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, that is very, very well armed and is really ready to do almost anything to dominate the world. And Mr. Biden really hasn't done much to keep us ahead of the game.
On there live with Ben Stein, and we haven't seen a hostage situation like this since President Carter was in office with the Iranian hostage crisis. Fortunately, 2 American hostages were freed today by the armed wing of Hamas. They've been identified now as a mother and daughter. Israel said they were being reunited with family on an Israeli military base today. Give us your reaction to this terrible war that's broken out there following the terror attack on Israel and the hostage situation that's unfolding.
Well, the extraordinary thing is we saw the terrorists break into Israel, go through the fences. They had maps of everything. They knew who was on duty. They knew who was not on duty. They knew which gates were locked and which were not locked. They knew better than I think the Israelis themselves knew what the security situation was in the towns on the border or near the border. And they just waltzed in, killed whoever they felt like killing in the most cruel, vicious, unspeakably barbaric way that can be imagined. They went into children's dormitories, scooped up children, cut their heads off, set them on fire in front of their parents. They went into women's dormitories, raped all the women they could find, chopped their heads off, and then set them on fire too. And this is a kind of barbarity that I don't think the world has seen, maybe ever in the 20th century. I realize it's now not the 20th century anymore. And the cruelty of these people is breathtaking. And but in the meantime, in America, we see thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people demonstrating in favor of Hamas, not against Hamas, demonstrating in favor of Hamas and saying that they're the victims. Well, that's nonsense. Hamas are barbarian killers, and the idea that they are somehow the victims is breathtakingly wrong and breathtakingly cruel. And I don't know what happened to Israel. Israel used to be the strongest security state in the world relative to its size. It's not anymore. Somehow Mr. Netanyahu let Israel get soft. And I pity the Israelis at this situation. If they don't pull themselves together in a gigantic way, I question their survivability.
On there live with Ben Stein, and it is to be noted, a U.S. Navy ship intercepted a number of missiles and drones launched from Yemen, apparently toward Israel this week. U.S. Pentagon folks telling us that the USS Carney, a Navy destroyer, was in the Red Sea and intercepted 3 missiles, and unnamed Israeli authorities told Israeli media that the missiles were fired in the direction of Israel. Obviously, this is a total powder keg here at this point. Ben Stein, what about the U.S. military involvement this week?
Well, I like the fact that the U.S. is going in there and trying to save the lives of innocent women and children and innocent men, too. There's no reason for innocent men to be killed either. I like the fact that we have a Navy strong enough to make some difference out there. But I wish we had a much bigger Navy. There's no reason why we should not have a 600-ship Navy. We're a very rich country. We should be able to afford a decent defense force and make it available to our closest allies. What it looks like to me, as I look on the map, is that Israel is pretty much surrounded by countries that hate Israel. Those countries are getting steadily more armed. Israel is not appropriately armed for its situation. I think at some point they're going to have to start really seriously considering nuclear weapons, which will be a terrible thing because I think at that point the Iranians will probably have and use nuclear weapons, and that will be a very, very bleak day in the history of the world. But I don't see any way around that. I mean, the bad guys are getting steadily more well-armed. We didn't keep up with the threats. Israel didn't keep up with the threats. We've got to do something dramatic to get ourselves up to snuff, or else there is going to be no more Israel, God forbid. And I don't want to see that. And I don't think anybody with a decent moral fiber wants to see that.
In the meantime, the U.S. House, paralyzed by this leadership battle at the moment, Ben Stein never saw anything like this, where the House Speaker position was vacated, and they're struggling now to get a new Speaker in there. What's your view of this battle playing out here on the home front?
Disgraceful. And I'm reminded of my former boss, Mr. Nixon, wonderful, wonderful man who would never let this happen in a million years, saying to me and to my father, who was chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, he was talking to both of us just as we were walking down the hall. He said, something you have to remember, gentlemen, is that the average Republican congressman isn't fit to be dog catcher. And I'm afraid there's a lot to that. And we have Republicans who now finally, well, not finally, but who have a majority in the House, and they cannot get a speaker. I mean, they're so poorly organized. They're so poorly led. They cannot get anything done with their majority. To be sure, it's a slender majority indeed, but it's disgraceful that they cannot get enough done to have a majority and to choose a speaker. It's just a disgrace to mankind. And if we cannot get this done, if we cannot get a Congress well organized enough to lead the world, there's really no stopping the bad guys in the world from dominating the world. There's nobody to replace the United States of America. So who does replace the United States of America? Maybe no one. Maybe there is no one to replace the loss of decent leadership in the Republican Party in the House.
We're all juggling life, a career, and trying to build a little bit of wealth. The Brown Ambition podcast with host Mandy and Tiffany the Budgetnista can help.
If I do even consider lending, I always ask myself, will this solve the problem? So I know you don't have your money for mortgage because you don't have a job. So what happens next month? Oh, I don't know. I'm going to have to think about that next month. Now, it's another thing if you're like, hey, Tiffany, I have $1,000 left to pay my car and then I'm car note free and I'll be able to pay you back, the 3 months I used to pay my car note. That solves the problem.
Brown Ambition.
Wherever you listen.
I don't know. The Republican Party has just fallen apart in a big way, and it's terrifying, at least terrifying to me, and there certainly isn't much in the way of leadership in the Democrat Party. I don't see what's going on Capitol Hill that gives us any hope for anything but chaos.
So Jim Jordan's quest to become Speaker, I don't know if you heard Tom Looney's report at the top of the hour. His quest to become a Speaker ended today as his fellow Republicans revoked their support following a third failed vote on the House floor. That means, by the way, the House, until at least next week, will remain unable to respond to what the president requested last night for a $106 billion national security package, including more military aid for Ukraine and Israel. So everything's in a holding pattern there. What are the prospects for this package to go forward, Ben Stein?
Well, it has to go forward. I mean, it has to go forward. There's no alternative. Israel needs the aid. Ukraine needs the aid. The United States of America, which is our main concern. I mean, after all, you and I don't live in Israel. You and I don't live in Ukraine. We live in America. And I'd like to see America be a little better or a lot better organized than it is. People in the Congress don't seem to realize we're facing very serious threats. We're facing a very, very well-armed Russia, a very, very well-armed, terrifyingly well-armed China, terrifyingly well-armed North Korea. What are we doing? We're just sucking our thumbs and sitting off in a corner, and what good is that going to do us or anyone else? We're facing a very seriously dangerous world, and we're just not doing anything much about it.
All right, who do you think is going to be the next speaker? I see the former Speaker McCarthy has endorsed Representative Tom Emmer, the number 3 House Republican. Who's going to take the spot?
I do not know, and I don't think anyone else knows. I saw a few days ago that Mr. Trump was going to run for that office. It sounds pretty far-fetched, sounds almost ridiculous, but maybe he's the guy who can do it. You do not have to be a member of the House to be Speaker of the House. I don't know. The Republican Party is. I love them because they stand for the same values that I stand for, but they are so confused, so poorly organized. It's almost unbelievable. I mean, I don't understand exactly what have they been doing the last several years while the Democrats were in charge. Did they make any plans at all to take over the leadership of the government, to take over the Congress? Did they do anything at all besides sit in the corner and suck their thumb? I mean, what are they doing?
At this critical moment, very good point. And then the possibility of another government shutdown next month, too, which they have to get to work on. So obviously we're seeing some impact here in the financial markets. It was a nervous week and a losing week, Ben Stein. I'm sorry to say the Dow was down nearly 300 today. What about the economy and all of this and the Fed's next move and Mr. and Mrs. Southern California trying to survive out there?
Well, we're not only trying to survive, frankly, we are surviving and we're surviving pretty well, but in fact, darn well. But what on earth happened to the Republican Party? I mean, on earth happened to a party that used to be a proud party that led the nation and indeed led most of the world? I don't know what happened to the Republican Party, and I don't think anyone else knows what happened either. And I don't know what happened to the Democrat Party either. I don't see much in the way of leadership or brilliance coming out of the Democrat Party either. It's what's going on? What's going on? I mean, what's happening in America that gives us such poor leadership and such poor organization? This country is the hope of mankind. We are the hope of all of the world, and we're not doing much. What's going on? What's gonna turn us around and save us?
I don't know if you saw the latest poll here, but former President Trump now leads President Biden by 2 points in a 2024 general election matchup, a hypothetical one at this point, improving his standing among young voters, according to the Emerson College poll released today. What's your reaction to that news?
I don't know what to make of America's young people. When I see that America's young people are demonstrating en masse in favor of the Palestinians and Hamas, and literally demonstrating in favor of people who kill infants sleeping in their beds and sleeping inside their mother's belly, I don't know what to make of them, and I don't know that anyone else knows what to make of them. The disgrace of America's college campuses has really never been matched in American history. It's terrifying what America's young people have turned into, and yet sometimes I run into them, I speak sometimes to them, and they're inspiring, brave. The ones in the armed forces are often incredibly brave. But the guys we're seeing now who are just one shot and away from saying kill the Jews, they're very close to that already. What happened to them? What happened to America's young people? What happened to a young American generation that has never had it so good, but is turning its future over to the leadership of people like Hamas? What on earth has happened to America's youth?
Unbelievable. We'll be hearing from Lisa Daftari, by the way, editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk, on the latest on the war in Israel coming up here shortly, Ben. And we appreciate you taking the call here and hope to speak with you very soon. Ben Stein, for our Frankenstein conversation, a serious one here with all that's happening in the world. Thank you very much, Ben Stein, for joining us live here tonight.
Let's pray for America, Frank.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Ben Stein, live with us here tonight. Mottek on Money on 790 KBC. Mottek on Money continues here on 790 KBC. Rough landing for the stock market to wrap up the week. The Dow down 287 points today, back to 33,127. The S&P 500 down 54 at 4,224. And the NASDAQ dropped 202 at 12,984. Pretty much erasing the summer rally this week. The benchmark bond yield soaring this week, with the yield on the 10-year note getting close to 5%, 4.99%. The highest seen since July of 2007. Looks like it pulled back today to 4.92%, but the damage has been done, with mortgage rates now hovering at or near 23-year highs. The price of oil moving higher this week, pulling back a bit today, down 62 cents at $88.75 a barrel. At Southern California gas pumps, prices have eased a bit from the recent highs. Right now, regular average is $5.63 a gallon in the L.A. Long Beach area. Premium now averaging $5.99. Hey, that's big news. Premium back below $6 a gallon on average. And diesel now at $6.30 a gallon on average, according to today's AAA fuel gauge survey. For the week, the Dow was down 1.6%, the S&P 500 down 2.4%, and the NASDAQ dropped 3.2%. Taking a look at some of the movers, banks were in focus this week on the earnings news. Today it was Regions Financial Corporation stock tumbling more than 12% after that bank's third quarter profit and revenue missed expectations as total loans increased, but deposits fell, and the regional banking industry faced economic and regulatory uncertainty given this tumultuous year, with commercial real estate very much in focus. American Express shares dropping 5.5% after it easily topped profit expectations for the third quarter, while calling out healthy spending and strong credit metrics, according to American Express. And Hewlett-Packard down about 6.5% after that company's fiscal forecast fell short of analyst expectations. Investors looking ahead to next week will be getting the big earnings news from the tech giants, including Alphabet, Google, Microsoft, and Amazon will be reporting their quarterly results. The shares are among a group of mega-cap stocks known as the Big Tech and among the Magnificent Seven that are responsible for much of the S&P 500's advance this year. Well, the Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic, a former USC professor, by the way, said today that the Fed might not cut interest rates until late 2024. That also weighed on the market today. And the Cleveland Fed President Loretta Mester said it would be useful to get away from meeting-by-meeting guessing games on interest rates. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Tensions running high in the Middle East. Israel responding to the October 7th terror attack on Israel, which killed 1,400 Israelis by pounding Gaza with airstrikes. Israel amassing tanks and troops near the border of the enclave for an expected ground invasion, calling on Palestinians to evacuate the north of Gaza, where it says Hamas is dug in. Today, 2 American hostages were freed by the armed wing of Hamas, were identified as Chicago area residents, a mother and daughter. The Israeli prime minister said the mother and daughter were abducted by Iranian-backed Islamist militants of Hamas from a kibbutz where they were staying during the surprise assault on southern Israel from Gaza on October 7th. Joining us live now is Lisa Daftari, Middle East analyst, editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk, and recipient of this year's Simon Wiesenthal Center Medal of Valor. Lisa, thank you very much for taking the call and give us your reaction to this latest news here.
Obviously, it's going to be a very consequential weekend. We're watching as tensions heat up here. Israel fighting 3 internal fronts. From the north, we have Hezbollah and Lebanon. From the south, you have Hamas in Gaza. And, of course, in the West Bank, you have Mahmoud Abbas's territories, which he has actually stayed quiet because there was backlash when he did call out Hamas. So he is staying quiet, and obviously there are militants there as well. Externally, you have Iran's proxies, Syria, Yemen, Iraq, targeting both Israel and U.S. assets and interests there. This is an absolute all-out proxy war. Iran's regime has called war on the big Satan, the United States, and the little Satan, Israel.
Lisa, let me ask you this. We heard from the president today thanking Qatar and Israel for their partnership in securing the release of the 2 American women today. Tell us about Qatar's role in all of this.
Qatar, it's interesting because Qatar is actually one of the funders of Hamas and many other terror organizations, but yet by the West they are also viewed as an honest broker or a mediator of sorts. So Qatar was called upon to help at least release some of the hostages. And just before the ground invasion of Gaza does begin, it was announced that 2 American hostages, a mother and daughter from Illinois, will be released, and they have been released through Gaza into Egypt and to the Red Cross, where they will travel back to their families.
And the other dramatic development this week, a U.S. Navy ship intercepting a number of missiles and drones launched from Yemen, apparently toward Israel. Give us your reaction to that big news and U.S. Military action now in the region.
Yeah, it's interesting that, the United States is going to do all that it can to de-escalate its own role to prevent from getting dragged into yet another war in the Middle East, which will, of course, inevitably escalate if the United States should get involved. Right now, we do have 2 tankers parked in the East Mediterranean. Of course, we hope that will only be symbolic at worst because the United States does not want to get involved. We already know the Biden administration has stopped short of calling out Iran's regime or acknowledging any involvement by Iran's regime in plotting this attack by its proxy Hamas against Israel on October 7th. The Biden administration, while supporting Israel and its right to defend itself, has not pledged any involvement, has not made any threats, and will probably try to mitigate these attacks by the proxies, whether it's in Iraq or Syria or Yemen, so that it does not have to get involved, it does not have to escalate, it does not have to define any one of these attacks as an attack on the United States. We have seen attacks by Iran's proxies against U.S. interests in the region many, many times. That is how Iran's regime does retaliate against the United States. This is all through proxy war. And, of course, taking an aerial view of all of this, Iran's regime looks like it is trying to poke and trying to instigate and trying to get a reaction out of the United States. Joe Biden, of course, last night in his speech did pledge more money towards Israel also called out the United States and Americans for not showing any anti-Semitism or Islamophobia, but at the same time, while supporting Israel, also pledged to give aid to Gaza, which inevitably will go to Hamas as well.
And it should be noted, right after the attack on Israel, the Wall Street Journal came out with a...
In 1995, veteran police officer Michael Chappell was convicted of armed robbery and murder and has spent the past 30 years in prison. The true crime podcast, In the Land of Lies, explores the untold side to this story, one that could prove Michael Chappell is actually innocent. See why people are calling In the Land of Lies incredible, phenomenal, and a must-hear podcast. Binge the entire series now, and new episodes are coming soon. Imperative Entertainment presents In the Land of Lies. Get the podcast wherever you listen.
Another detailed report on Iran's involvement. That's what they reported on Monday morning following the weekend of the attacks, and yet the Biden administration reluctant to point a finger at Iran as behind all this.
Yes, it's interesting because the foreign policy of the Biden administration from day one coming into office and saying that they will get back into the Iran nuclear deal and reverse the policies of Donald Trump to go back to what it was under President Obama. President Obama, if you remember, did look the other way with a lot of inconvenient escalations by Iran's regime in order to get a nuclear deal. That was very important to him. He felt that was the high point of his foreign policy, and President Biden coming into office wanting to do the same. Now, he has jumped through a lot of hoops going back to the negotiating table with Iran's regime multiple times to try to strike a nuclear deal. It did not work. Imagine an administration that wanted this deal so badly, but yet the concessions that the Iran regime was asking for were so egregious that the administration could not agree to them. Going back and forth. In the meantime, the Biden administration did remove very vital sanctions from Iran's regime, allowing them to earn up to $60 to $90 billion in oil revenues, finding new partners like China and others to sell oil to. This is why a lot of people, including myself, have talked about the Biden administration emboldening Iran's regime to be able to, together with Hamas and other proxies, to launch this attack. Going back to the Wall Street Journal report expose that you pointed to, that talked about how this has been a very complex plot that Iran's regime worked together not only with Hamas, but 4 terror organizations combined. So 4 of its proxies combined. We believe that is Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hamas, Hezbollah included, and they met in Beirut multiple times until they finally got the green light from Iran's regime. October 7th.
On the air live with Lisa Dafchari. And Lisa, I want to mention while we have the chance here, not too long ago, you stood with Rabbi Marvin Heyer from the Simon Wiesenthal Center. He was on this program a week ago today, by the way, and you were honored with the Medal of Valor by the Simon Wiesenthal Center for defending human rights and for highlighting the protest of Iranian women in Iran against the Islamic Republic. Can you give us an update on what's happening internally in Iran at the moment?
It's a great question and an important point here. The protesters, those who are asking for regime change, those who were out on the streets for a year for Masa Amini, the protest about the woman who took off her hijab and was beaten, or wasn't wearing proper hijab and was beaten to death. So many of them showing support to the United States, to Israel right now, understanding that it is their regime that has put money into terrorism to kill innocent Israelis. Look, they have been raised from day one when they go to school. They have been raised under this regime to hate Jews and to side with the. And we have seen in so many instances on the streets of Iran right now where that has been flipped, where they are showing support with the Israelis, showing support with Jews around the world, and calling out their government for supporting Hamas.
Lisa Dafchari, thank you very much for joining us live here this evening. I'm looking forward to speaking with you as we follow this crisis very, very closely. Thank you very much for taking the call here this evening.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. That is the Foreign Desk Editor-in-Chief and Middle East expert Lisa Dafchari, who received the Medal of Valor from the Simon Wiesenthal Center this year for defending human rights and for her work in highlighting the ongoing courageous protests by Iranian women against the Islamic Republic. Folks, if you're hurt in an accident, you need an experienced advocate, and Clark Fielding and his team of sharks at Fielding Law are on standby ready to dive into your case. My friend Clark the Shark is fearless for justice and your go-to attorney when injured in an accident that wasn't your fault. Whether it's a car accident, slip, trip, fall, or any kind of personal injury, Fielding Law is here to make sure you get the care, attention, and compensation you deserve. Fielding Law can assess the circumstances of the case, negotiate tenaciously with insurance companies, and if necessary, file a lawsuit and litigate to seek fair compensation on behalf of you, the injured party. An injury is a major disruption in your life. Medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, property damage, and other losses incurred as a result of the injury are all part of the damages. Don't try and handle the process alone. You need an expert in the process, and the team at Fielding Law are the ones to trust. Put Clark Fielding's number in your phone right now under the word accident. That number is 833-88-SHARK, 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KABC. Good evening. Well, rough week on the stock market. The Dow down 287 today to 33,127. The S&P 500 down 54 at 4,224. And the NASDAQ gave back 202 points at 12,984. Obviously, war worries and rising bond yields weighing on the financial markets this week. That yield on the 10-year note, which impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates out there, got as high as 4.99%. Pulled back a bit today, but already we're seeing mortgage rates hover at or near new 23-year highs. Oil also getting a lift this week, down a bit today, down 62 cents to $88.75 a barrel in New York, up 1.2% for the week. We're also watching Brent crude in London, the international benchmark, moving a bit higher this week as well, down 22 cents today to $92.16 a barrel, ending 1.4% higher for the week. Gas prices hovering around $5.63 a gallon on average now in the L.A. Long Beach area. Premium now at $5.99 a gallon on average. Yep, you heard me, below $6 a gallon for the first time in a while. $6.30 now, the average price for diesel. We got some Fed heads talking today. Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic said the Fed might not cut interest rates until late 2024. And the Cleveland Fed President, Loretta Mester, said it would be useful to get away from meeting-by-meeting guessing games on interest rates. Whether that's going to happen, of course, that is going to be a long shot. The Fed will be meeting at the end of this month, and they will be deciding whether to raise interest rates again. And the consensus seems to be on Wall Street that the rates will stay higher for longer. We might not see a pullback in interest rates until late next year, as the Fed continues to wrestle with still stubbornly high inflation, still running about double what the Fed target is, which is 2%. Stocks also seeing continued selling pressure from rising bond yields after bearish traders worried that the Fed Chairman Jerome Powell's remarks we heard just yesterday meant that another interest rate hike could be coming, and the Fed might not cut rates until sometime late next year. For the week, we see the Dow down 1.6%, the S&P 500 down 2.4%, and the NASDAQ sank 3.2%. The tech-heavy NASDAQ, which historically has been sensitive to higher interest rates, logging back-to-back weekly losses. The S&P 500 snapped 2 straight weeks of gains, and all 3 of the major market averages booked their largest percentage weekly drops since the week ending September 22nd. Basically, stocks ending lower today, booking their worst week in about a month, after that rise in Treasury bond yields, as well as higher oil prices amid worries over the war in the Middle East, weighed on investor sentiment. What else is happening? Well, the nearly 2-week war between Israel and Hamas, as you've heard, have been weighing on investors. Investors worry of further escalation by a possible ground invasion by the Israeli military. Palestinians in Gaza reported heavy strikes in the southern region, where they had been told to evacuate, with a large Israeli town in the north near the Lebanese border also now evacuating, according to the Associated Press. The latest reports from the Times of Israel say the Palestinian terrorists in Gaza continue to rain down rockets on Israel's south, and the Israeli Air Force pounded Hamas targets in the Strip tonight amid Israel's ongoing war with the Islamist terror group. Closer to home, the Beverly Hills Police Chief Mark Stainbrook releasing a statement sharing proactive steps police are taking to enhance safety and security, safety and well-being of the community a top priority. The Beverly Hills Chamber of Commerce and Rodeo Drive, meanwhile, celebrating 100 years this year. And joining us live now is Todd Johnson, the president and CEO of the Beverly Hills Chamber of Commerce. Todd, thank you very much for taking the call here. And first of all, tell us what's happening there in the beautiful city of Beverly Hills.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, thank you always for having me on your show. I really appreciate it, to you and your listeners. As you said, there's been some tension, certainly, with what's going on with Israel. And the Chamber put out a statement that we fully support Israel and, condone the killing of any people anywhere. And we look forward to peace and tranquility, not only in that section of the world, but worldwide sometime. But as far as Beverly Hills go, we have a lot of good things going on. As you being a resident, you know that we have a art show that this weekend. There's over 200 booths with some amazing art, and there'll be several thousand people that will come into the city to see this show. As you mentioned, the Chamber's 100th anniversary is this year, and we have a large event that will be taking place at the Beverly Hilton on November 8th, which I know that you'll be there for. And it's going to be great. We're going to acknowledge 7 businesses. All of them have been with us between 95 and 75 years as members of Chamber. So we have some special businesses in our city, and we're very fortunate. We're also headed to New York. I'm leaving Sunday with the mayor and the vice mayor and the city manager. We go out, and there's about 24 meetings that we have with businesses that are interested in coming to our city. We're meeting with headquarters of a lot of the Rodeo Drive, Ralph Lauren's and the LVMH's and these kind of headquarters, which are all there in New York, and see if there's anything that we can do in particular to help them. We have 16 new businesses that have just recently opened, and there's another 15 that will be opening. Some Michelin star restaurants that are coming into town. So there's an awful lot of good stuff going on, as you can tell.
That's wonderful. And, of course, you got Chamber of Commerce weather as well, Todd. Absolutely gorgeous day there today, and it looks like it's going to be beautiful for the art show there this weekend.
Yeah, I think hopefully yourself, but the listeners, if they want to come, it's a great time to come out, and it looks like the weather gods will be on our side, as you said, that it's going to break from this bit of warm temperature that we had. It's going to be really comfortable the next several days, and it'll be a great time to come to the city, see some amazing art. And as I said, there's over 200 booths. And there's some food trucks, but there's so many good restaurants within walking distance of the park. And our police will be on hand, and our security. And it's, as you've heard me say prior, it is one of the safest cities there is. And we're very comfortable in holding this. Another event that I should mention to you and your listeners, which I know you'll bring your daughter to, is the celebratory lighting of the holidays, which will happen on Rodeo Drive. And that's actually going to be on November 16th, where they light up the whole city with different lights and ornaments and a theme on the Rodeo Drive and some big name entertainment that'll be there. And it ends with a fireworks show that's pretty spectacular, and that brings in 4,000 or 5,000 people as well. So a lot of good things going on in our section of the town, and we certainly welcome anyone to come join us.
That's wonderful, Todd. Well, we'll take you up on that invitation, and thank you very much for sharing that beautiful story, what's happening in Beverly Hills. That is Todd Johnson, the president and CEO of the Beverly Hills Chamber of Commerce, celebrating 100 years this year. And Rodeo Drive, by the way, also celebrating 100 years. Thank you very much, Todd, for joining us live. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with our legal eagle, Royal Oaks. Have a great weekend. This is Mottek on Money on 790 KBC.
Get an inside look at Hollywood with Michael Rosenbaum.
Let's get inside of Anthony LaPaglia. My grandmother will be 95 in June. I haven't drank water in 95 years. Look at me. Do I need water? You look a little dehydrated.
A little bit. Your skin's a little dry. And when I do drink it, it bores me.
Yeah.
Just drinking it, I start to nod off.
Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum, wherever you listen.